My name is Sarah Mitchell, 28 years old, a graphic designer who carved out my own space in Portland, Oregon. It was a Wednesday evening when my phone lit up with a message from my mother that made my blood run cold. Stop reaching out. This is over. My chest tightened, but I refused to break down or plead. I simply typed back, understood. That single word marked the end of years spent draining my savings and energy into my family, covering my mother's prescription costs, rescuing my sister from financial disasters, keeping their bakery from closing its doors. All of it, erased by one cold message. I'd always been the outlier, the one who pursued art instead of joining their business, the one they never quite accepted. But that message drew a line I wouldn't cross again. I wasn't going to beg for their approval anymore. By 2 a.m., my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Missed calls, frantic voicemails, desperate texts flooding in. My mother's number appeared repeatedly, then my sister's, even my father's. They were spiraling, and I knew exactly why. For years, I'd been their financial lifeline, and now that safety net was gone, what unfolded next completely shattered everything I thought I understood about my family. Stay with me to discover how it all fell apart. Growing up in Portland, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. My father owned a small chain of artisan bakeries, a respected businessman who'd transformed a single storefront into a successful operation. My mother had left her accounting job to support him, managing the household and softening his hard edges. My sister Melissa, 3 years younger than me, was the chosen one, the one they bet everything on to continue the family tradition. And me? I was Sarah Mitchell, the misfit who dreamed of colors and compositions instead of flour and profit margins. From an early age, my father made his expectations crystal clear. "The bakeries are our future," he'd announce during family meals, his voice commanding attention. "You need to learn this business, Sarah." But I had no interest in commercial ovens or inventory spreadsheets. I wanted to create visual stories, brands, logos, designs that made people feel something. By my junior year of high school, I was filling sketchbooks with logo concepts and dreaming of sleek studios and creative campaigns. When I told my father I wanted to study graphic design, he actually laughed out loud. "That's a pastime, not a profession," he said, his tone cutting deep. My mother remained silent, her gaze shifting away. She'd already made her choice. At 18, I got accepted to a prestigious design school in San Francisco. The acceptance email had me floating on air, but my father's response brought me crashing down. "If you're not joining the bakeries, you're completely on your own," he stated flatly, arms folded. No tuition assistance, no financial support whatsoever. My mother nodded in agreement, her silence speaking volumes. Melissa, only 15 at the time, actually smirked, like she'd won some contest. I felt like a stranger in my own family, their obvious favoritism toward her already creating an unbridgeable gap. I juggled 3 jobs, working retail, freelancing design work, and bartending on weekends, to cover what my scholarships didn't. Exhausting nights, endless shifts, and crushing student debt got me through. My father never once asked how I was managing, and my mother's occasional "I'm proud of you" rang hollow when she'd immediately turn around and praise Melissa's mediocre contributions to the bakeries. She could mess up an entire order and they'd find a way to excuse it. I remember one Thanksgiving break during college. Melissa had forgotten to lock up one of the bakery locations, resulting in a break-in that cost thousands in damages and stolen equipment. My father brushed it aside. "She's still learning," he said, while I got lectured for missing a family brunch to meet a critical design deadline. The distance between us kept growing. My father's attention stayed fixed on Melissa, the daughter who would inherit the empire, regardless of how little passion she showed. My mother followed his lead completely, saving her warmth for her. I tried maintaining a connection with my mother, calling on weekends, sharing my design portfolio, but her responses were always brief, distracted. "Melissa's helping at the bakery," she'd mention, as if it were some badge of honor. I wanted to shout, "What about me?" But I kept it inside, believing that someday they'd recognize my value. By graduation, the divide was impossible to ignore. I'd established a reputation for myself in Portland, working with tech startups and local businesses on their branding. But at family gatherings, the conversation always circled back to the bakeries. "When are you finally joining us?" my father would ask, as if my entire career was invisible. Melissa would add her mocking comments about my computer doodles, and my mother would smile along, never once defending me. Their favoritism wasn't just a feeling, it was a concrete barrier. And I was on the wrong side of it. Looking back now, those early years laid the foundation for everything that came after. I kept pushing to prove myself, to earn a spot in their world. But the harder I tried, the more obvious it became. They'd chosen Melissa, and I was just the backup they never wanted. After design school, I threw everything into establishing my graphic design career. San Francisco had taught me to think creatively, building brand identities that told stories, not just pretty pictures. Back in Portland, I started with small clients, rebranding local coffee shops and transforming their visual presence. My breakthrough came at 25 when a regional tech startup hired me to develop their entire brand identity from scratch. Clean aesthetics, bold typography, and strategic positioning, my work started getting noticed. Soon, established companies and emerging brands were reaching out. And my name, Sarah Mitchell, began appearing in Pacific Northwest design circles. By 27, I was signing contracts worth substantial fees, building a reputation as Portland's go-to designer for authentic brand storytelling. But home was a completely different reality. 4 years ago, my mother developed a chronic illness. The doctors were direct. Her treatment would cost tens of thousands, possibly more. My father's bakeries were struggling with increased competition, and their insurance barely scratched the surface. I didn't hesitate. I transferred money for her medical bills, covering specialist appointments and expensive medications. "We'll reimburse you," my father said during a brief phone call, his voice clipped, but I knew that promise was empty. My mother sent a text. "Thank you, Sarah." That was the extent of it. No phone calls, no genuine gratitude. It hurt, but I convinced myself I was doing it for her health, not their approval. Then came Melissa. My sister, in her mid-20s, had launched a side venture, a gourmet food delivery service that collapsed within 6 months. She'd accumulated massive debts, maxed out multiple credit cards, and couldn't contribute her share to the family bakery operations. My father called me one night, all business. "Melissa needs assistance," he said, as if it were my responsibility to fix her mistakes. I sent the money, $25,000 to clear her debts and another $15,000 to keep the bakeries operational. Melissa never acknowledged it. Instead, at a family barbecue, she boasted about how she'd figured things out herself, as if my money hadn't rescued her. My father patted her shoulder proudly while I stood there, completely invisible. I kept giving. When one of the bakeries needed critical equipment replacement, a commercial oven that cost a fortune, I covered it. When my mother's treatment required a specialist consultation in Seattle, I paid for everything, including travel and accommodations. Each time, I hoped they'd truly see me, not just as a source of money. But at family dinners, the conversation always revolved around the bakeries, Melissa's potential, or my father's expansion plans. My work barely got a mention. Once, I shared an industry publication feature about my branding work for a major client, thinking my mother might be impressed. She glanced at it briefly and said, "That's nice, but Melissa's putting in such hard work at the bakery." I forced a smile, my chest tight with disappointment. The pattern wore me down. I'd call my mother hoping for a genuine conversation, but she'd immediately pivot to Melissa's latest idea or my father's stress. My father never asked about my projects, only contacting me when they needed financial help. "The bakery's running short this month," he'd say, and I'd make the transfer, feeling more like a bank than a daughter. Melissa, meanwhile, acted completely entitled, as if my success was somehow owed to the family. "You're doing well financially, so why not contribute?" she said once, casual and dismissive, as if my years of grinding meant nothing. Looking back, I see how foolish I was, thinking money would earn their respect. Every check I wrote, every bill I paid was me trying to bridge the gap they'd constructed. But they took it all, hundreds of thousands over the years, and gave nothing in return. Not even basic acknowledgement. The hurt accumulated quietly but heavily, and I started questioning if I'd ever be enough for them. 4 years into my career, I pitched an ambitious idea to my family. My graphic design business was flourishing, and I'd been developing a new concept, a sustainable branding agency specializing in eco-conscious businesses and green startups. It wasn't just passion, it was a solid business strategy backed by market analysis, showing significant demand for ethical branding in Portland's progressive business community. I needed capital to scale properly, and for the first time I thought my family might recognize my vision as legitimate. I prepared a comprehensive presentation, complete financial projections and growth forecasts, and invited them to a meeting at our family home. I stood in the living room, my laptop ready, slides prepared. My father sat in his usual chair, arms crossed, expression unreadable. My mother busied herself with coffee, avoiding eye contact. Melissa slouched on the couch, scrolling through her phone, barely present. Her husband, Marcus Chen, sat beside her. Giving me an encouraging nod, I took a breath and began, explaining how sustainable branding could attract conscious consumers and create long-term client relationships. This could position Portland as a leader in ethical design, I said, voice steady despite my nerves. I'm requesting a $175,000 investment. I'll repay it with interest. My father cut me off mid-sentence. Wishful thinking, he interrupted, leaning forward. You think businesses care about recycled paper? They want affordable, not experimental nonsense. His words felt like a physical blow, but I continued, showing client demand data. Melissa snorted without even looking up. Sounds like throwing money away, she said. Why don't you stick to making logos? I clenched my fists beneath the table, my face burning. I'd spent months developing this plan, and they were dismissing it without consideration. My mother stayed quiet, rearranging coasters, her standard way of avoiding confrontation. I turned to her, desperate for any support. Mom, you've seen my success. You know I can execute this. She hesitated, then mumbled. It seems uncertain. Sarah, the bakeries are what we understand. Her words hurt more than my father's. I'd funded her medical care, kept their business afloat, and still, I was the outsider. Marcus spoke up, his voice gentle but firm. I think it's forward-thinking, he said, glancing nervously at Melissa. Sustainability is a major market trend now. For a moment, I felt hopeful, but Melissa shot him a sharp look and he backed down, saying nothing more. My father waved dismissively, ending the discussion. We're not investing in this, he declared. Melissa's developing a new bakery location. That's our priority. Melissa smirked like she'd won a competition I hadn't known I was in. I made one final attempt. This isn't charity, I said, my voice rising. It's an investment with returns. I've built my career from nothing. You know I deliver results. My father shook his head. You chose your direction, Sarah. The family business takes precedence. Maybe if you actually contributed to the bakeries, we'd take you seriously, Melissa added. I wanted to scream. I'd given them hundreds of thousands, rescued them repeatedly, and they still saw me as a kid with a sketchbook. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with their rejection. I packed up my laptop, hands trembling. Marcus caught my eye as I left, mouthing, I'm sorry, but it didn't help. Driving home, I replayed their words, each one confirming I'd never be enough. My father's focus was always on Melissa. My mother's silence was equally damaging, her loyalty permanently tied to my father's vision. Even Marcus, who saw potential in my idea, couldn't stand against them. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my business plan. I'd poured everything into it, just like I'd poured everything into my family. But their rejection wasn't about the business, it was about me. They didn't believe in me, and that realization cut deeper than anything. I didn't realize it then, but that meeting marked the beginning of the end. One evening after a family dinner, I discovered something I wasn't supposed to know. The table had been cleared, and I'd stepped into the kitchen to grab my jacket, planning to leave. Marcus lingered near the counter, his hands nervously fidgeting with a kitchen towel. He glanced around, then pulled me aside, his voice barely audible. "Sarah, there's something you should know," he said, his eyes darting toward the dining room where my father and Melissa were talking. "Melissa's been taking money from the bakeries. Thousands. That's why they're struggling financially." My stomach dropped. I knew the bakeries were having problems, but I thought it was just poor management. "She's been siphoning funds for years," Marcus continued, his voice shaking. "I found documentation, hidden transactions. She's deceiving your parents." I stood frozen, processing his revelation. Marcus looked terrified, as if he'd just betrayed his own wife. Before I could respond, I heard my father's voice rising from the adjacent room. I moved closer quietly, staying hidden behind the doorway. He was talking to my mother, their voices low but tense. "We need to finalize the estate planning," my father said firmly. "Melissa's the only one maintaining this family's legacy. Sarah's off pursuing her own interests. She doesn't care about us." My heart pounded. My mother murmured something inaudible, then said, "She's contributed so much financially, Stephen." My father interrupted her. "Money, not commitment. Melissa's our legacy. We'll transfer the bakeries to her." I felt like I'd been punched. They were erasing me from their future, after everything I'd sacrificed. I slipped out through the back door, my mind racing. All those years funding my mother's medical care, rescuing Melissa, saving their bakeries, and they considered me disloyal. I drove home in a fog, replaying Marcus's confession and my father's words. Melissa's theft explained the constant financial shortages, the overdue supplier payments I'd covered. And yet they were choosing her, rewarding her deception. The betrayal burned, but I wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Stop reaching out. This is over." The words felt like a physical assault. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. This wasn't just about the estate. It was personal. My mother, the one I'd tried hardest to connect with, was cutting me off. I typed back "understood" and hit send before I could second-guess myself. My finger hovered over the call button, but I stopped. No more chasing, no more begging. If they wanted me gone, I'd give them exactly that. I opened my banking app and canceled every automatic payment I'd established for them. My mother's medical expenses, gone. Melissa's debt payments, stopped. The bakery's operational costs, no longer my responsibility. I'd spent over $250,000 keeping them functioning. Countless hours working to fund their lives, and they'd thrown it back at me. Cutting those financial ties felt like removing a weight I'd carried for years. But it also hurt deeply. I wasn't just stopping payments. I was releasing the hope that they'd ever truly see me. As I sat there, staring at the confirmation notifications for the canceled transactions, I felt a mixture of relief and anger. Marcus's words kept replaying. Melissa's theft, hidden for years. How long had they known? Had my parents covered for her? Or were they oblivious? Either way, their choice to favor her over me was undeniable. I considered calling Marcus, asking for more information, but I didn't. He'd taken a risk telling me, and I wasn't certain where his ultimate loyalty lay. That night, I lay awake, my mother's text burning in my thoughts. "This is over." It wasn't just a message, it was a declaration. They'd chosen their side, and I wasn't on it. But I wasn't the same person who'd begged for their validation. I'd built my life independently, and now I'd protect it. Their betrayal had ignited something in me, and I refused to let it destroy me. By 2 a.m., my phone became a whirlwind of notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, texts. My mother's number appeared first, then Melissa's, then my father's. They'd obviously realized I'd cut off the financial support. I didn't answer. I sat on my couch watching the screen, each buzz tightening the tension in my chest. After years of being their safety net, I'd pulled away and they were falling apart. Melissa's first voicemail was hostile. "You think you can just abandon us, Sarah?" she hissed. "You're completely selfish, leaving us stranded like this." Selfish? I almost laughed. I'd cleared her debts, supported the bakeries, and she had the audacity to call me selfish. Her next message was more threatening. "You'll regret this decision," she said, her voice cold. "We'll pursue legal options if necessary." I deleted it, my hand steady but my heart racing. Legal action for what? Rescuing them from her mess for years? My mother's texts flooded in, a barrage of guilt. "How could you abandon me, Sarah?" one read. "After everything I've endured, you're turning your back on your own mother." Another said, "I raised you to be better than this." I stared at those words, her attempt to manipulate me. She'd always known how to pull my emotional strings, reminding me of the late-night conversations we used to share, the ones I thought mattered. But now it felt like manipulation, not genuine love. I didn't respond. I couldn't let her words pull me back in. My father's call came at 1:30 a.m. I let it go to voicemail, his voice commanding through the speaker. "Sarah, you need to resolve this immediately," he said, like I was an employee who'd made an error. "The bakeries can't function without your financial support." "You owe us that much? Owe them?" I'd given over $250,000, years of my life, and they'd erased me from their estate, dismissed my career, chosen Melissa despite her lies. I saved the voicemail, not from guilt, but as a reminder of their true character. By morning, the messages continued. Melissa sent another text. "You're destroying this family. This is your fault." I could picture her pacing, blaming everyone except herself for the situation she'd created. Marcus called once but didn't leave a message. I wondered if he felt trapped in the middle, knowing what Melissa had done but too frightened to speak up again. My mother's next voicemail was softer, almost pleading. "Sarah, please," she said, her voice breaking. "We're family. You can't just abandon us like this." I wanted to believe her sincerity, but her text, "This is over," still burned in my memory. "Family didn't discard you like that." My father's second call came that afternoon. I answered, thinking maybe, just maybe, he'd acknowledge they were wrong. Instead, he launched in immediately. "You're endangering your mother's health," he said. "Her treatments aren't inexpensive and the bakeries are failing. You need to step up. Not a word about the estate, Melissa's theft, or their betrayal." I gripped the phone, my voice calm but cold. "I've been stepping up for years, Dad. I'm done." He paused, then said, "You'll reconsider when you see the consequences." I hung up, my resolve strengthening. The harassment didn't stop. Melissa's next message threatened to expose me, whatever that meant. "Everyone will know how you betrayed us," she wrote. I rolled my eyes. Betrayed them? After carrying their burden for years? My mother sent another text invoking childhood memories. "Remember when I helped you with your first art project?" she wrote. "I've always supported you." But she hadn't. Not when I needed her to defend me. Not when they mocked my dreams. I remained silent through everything. Each message, each call was a desperate attempt to pull me back into their chaos. But I saw it clearly now. They didn't want me, just my money. I checked my bank account, confirming the canceled payments. No more covering my mother's medical bills. No more rescuing Melissa. No more saving my father's bakeries. I'd spent years trying to earn their respect. But respect wasn't what they offered. It was control. And I was done surrendering it. By week's end, their panic had only intensified. Their words, angry, pleading, threatening, kept accumulating. But I didn't waver. I'd made my choice, not from spite, but survival. I wasn't their ATM anymore. I was Sarah Mitchell, and I was done being their backup plan. 10 days later, I met them at a Portland cafe. I'd agreed to one final meeting, not to reconcile, but to close this chapter permanently. The atmosphere was thick with tension as I entered, spotting my father, mother, and Melissa at a corner table. Marcus wasn't there. He'd texted an apology, saying he couldn't handle the confrontation. I sat down, my posture confident, my determination unshakable. I wasn't the same Sarah who'd begged for their validation years ago. I started with the truth. I sold my sustainable branding agency, I said, my voice steady. A national marketing firm acquired it for $850,000. Their eyes widened, but I didn't pause. I built that independently without your support. Despite your doubts. My father's jaw clenched. My mother looked away. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. I leaned forward. I gave you everything. Money, time, trust. And you discarded it. Chose Melissa over me, even after she stole from you? I didn't mention Marcus's name, protecting his confidence. Melissa's face flushed red. You're lying, she snapped. You're just bitter, trying to destroy us. I didn't flinch. The financial records don't lie, Melissa. I know what you did. My mother's hand went to her mouth, but she remained silent. My father's voice was sharp. You don't have the right to judge us, he said. You abandoned the family business. I laughed bitterly. I abandoned it? You pushed me out, Dad. You removed me from your estate. Called me uncommitted. My mother tried her usual approach, her voice soft and pleading. Sarah, we're your family. You can't turn away from us now. I met her eyes directly. You turned away first, Mom. That text, "This is over," was your decision. She flinched, tears forming. But I wasn't moved. I'm done being your safety net, I said. I deserve respect, not manipulation. If you can't provide that, we're finished, Melissa scoffed. You think you're superior to us? You'll come crawling back eventually. I shook my head. No, Melissa. I won't. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. This is it, I said. No more financial support, no more contact, no more chances. My father's expression hardened. You'll regret this, Sarah, he said, echoing Melissa's threat from before. I didn't respond. I walked out, the cafe door closing behind me, my heart heavy but liberated. I didn't look back. A year later, I heard about the consequences through mutual acquaintances. The family bakeries filed for bankruptcy, unable to survive without my financial backing. Melissa faced legal issues. Suppliers sued her when her hidden accounts surfaced, exposing years of embezzlement. My parents retreated into a quiet, isolated existence, their legacy crumbling around them. Marcus, I learned, had divorced Melissa and relocated to start fresh somewhere else. I didn't reach out. That chapter was permanently closed. I moved forward, channeling my energy into my design firm. The sale of my agency gave me the freedom to expand internationally, hiring a talented team and working with clients across continents. My life wasn't perfect, but it was authentically mine, built on my own terms, not theirs. I found peace in establishing boundaries, in prioritizing myself over a family that never prioritized me. The pain of their betrayal lingered, but it no longer defined who I was. Looking back, I learned something essential. Self-respect begins with yourself. I spent years trying to earn their love, thinking I had to prove my value. But no amount of money or sacrifice could change their perception of me. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary for survival. It taught me to value my own worth, to walk away from those who don't appreciate it. I hope anyone listening to this story takes that lesson to heart. Family isn't an obligation to endure pain. It's a bond that should elevate you. If it doesn't, you have every right to let go. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. It wasn't easy sharing this, but it's my truth. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family? Share your story in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and I'm grateful for everyone who listened.